"Sir, this seat is reserved for VIP guests only. I'm going to have to ask you to move." The words hit him like a slap, quiet, yet sharp enough to cut. Robert Hayes looked up slowly. His posture was calm, composed, dressed in an immaculate navy suit. He glanced at the ticket in his hand. First class. Seat 1A. No mistake. But the flight attendant standing before him didn't flinch. She folded her arms, her badge glinting under the terminal lights. Her voice lowered, but the tone stayed cold. "There's been a change in seating, sir. We'll find you something else of equal value." He didn't speak right away. Around him a few passengers watched with silent curiosity. Some leaned in, others smirked knowingly. He could hear the faint hum of whispers. One man in a golf cap muttered, "Can't imagine how he got that seat to begin with." The words weren't loud, but loud enough. Robert's jaw tensed. "I paid for this seat," he said quietly, his eyes steady. "There's been no change in anything except your tone." The attendant blinked. Her professionalism cracked for a second. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." "I'm not. I'm sitting in my assigned seat." A second flight attendant walked over. This one a man, younger, nervous energy. His eyes scanned Robert quickly, assessing him like a problem, not a person. "We just need you to cooperate, sir. We have a priority guest who needs this seat." Robert didn't move. A soft scoff came from a few rows back. A white man in a beige blazer and loafers adjusted his Rolex and chuckled to the man beside him. "Entitlement these days," he said under his breath. But Robert heard it. Everyone did. Still, Robert didn't rise. His ticket was clutched loosely in his fingers, still crisp from check-in. "Can you explain?" Robert said, his voice level, "how someone else is a priority over the person who legally owns this seat." The first attendant looked visibly annoyed now. She leaned in as if trying to lower the temperature by whispering her authority into his ear. "Sir, we don't want to escalate this. Please don't cause a scene." "Not causing a scene," he said, "just refusing to be walked over." By now more people were watching. Phones came out. A little girl sitting 2 rows behind whispered to her mother, "Why won't they let him sit there?" The mother didn't answer. One of the gate supervisors stepped in, short, balding, with a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. He had the tone of someone used to apologizing while still getting his way. "Let's step off the plane, sir. We can sort this out privately." "No," Robert replied. The word hung in the air like thunder. "This is my seat," he said, holding up his boarding pass. "You have no reason to remove me, except the color of my skin and the assumptions you've built around it." The plane fell quiet. The gate supervisor stiffened. "Sir, I'm asking you nicely, and I'm declining politely," Robert cut in. "If there's a documented issue, I'm happy to see it. But if not, I suggest you let me fly in peace." A white passenger, clearly amused by the scene, leaned across the aisle and said, "It's not that deep, man. Just move. Ain't that serious?" Robert turned his head slowly toward him. "It's serious when you've lived your whole life being told you don't belong in rooms you built from the ground up." The man smirked. "You built this airline now?" "I built myself," Robert replied, "and I earned this seat." Suddenly the supposed VIP entered the cabin. A white man in a tailored gray suit flanked by 2 employees. The moment he saw Robert, he paused. "You want me to displace him?" the man asked the attendant, lowering his voice. The attendant nodded. "Company protocol. You're on the executive partner list." The man hesitated, then looked at Robert with a tight-lipped expression. "I don't want trouble." Robert stared back, unreadable. "It's not about trouble," Robert said. "It's about how easily people like me are told to move, to step aside, to give up space we rightfully earned, and how comfortable everyone is watching it happen." The silence that followed was louder than any argument. The attendants exchanged glances, unsure. The manager looked down at his device, pretending to check something. Robert remained still, his hands on the armrest, composed but clearly exhausted, like this wasn't new, just another page in a long book he never wanted to write. From the back, someone muttered, "Just let him have the seat already. This is embarrassing." Another voice agreed. "He's right. It's his seat. What are we even doing?" And then, finally, a voice from the front, a woman, older, with silver hair and sharp eyes. "You're going to regret this," she said, looking at the staff. "He's someone important, I can feel it. And even if he wasn't, he deserves respect." But respect had already been denied. Robert finally stood, not because he was giving in, but because he was reclaiming the air in the room. He turned to face the aisle, shoulders straight, his voice calm but powerful. "You know, this isn't the first time I've been asked to give up something I earned," he said. "And every time the assumption was the same. I wasn't supposed to be here. I couldn't possibly be the one with the credentials, the success, the right. But what's worse isn't being underestimated. It's being disrespected without cause, without thought, without apology." He looked directly at the manager. This will be the last time someone tells me to move. And with that, he pulled something from his inner coat pocket, a slim, black leather wallet. From it, he slid out a polished card. Not a credit card, not an ID, a business card. Silver lettering on thick, matte black. The flight attendant leaned in to read it and her face dropped. It read, Robert Hayes, founder and CEO, Altura Holdings International Executive Shareholder, Goldwing Airlines. Her lips parted, but no, words came out. Someone gasped, and for the first time, they wanted to disappear. Robert Hayes had spent his entire life proving people wrong. From the moment he stepped into his first business class at age 17, they told him he was aiming too high. But boys like him, black, quiet, bookish, raised by a single mother in the South, didn't belong in boardrooms or behind the wheel of power. But he didn't listen. He worked 2 jobs through college, built his first startup in a cramped apartment with borrowed laptops and hand-me-down chairs, and kept going when others folded. Every closed door taught him how to build his own. By the time he was 38, Robert wasn't just successful. He was legendary in certain circles. CEO of a multinational investment firm, mentor to hundreds, silent partner in 3 airlines, including Goldwing, the very one whose first-class lounge had just tried to reduce him to nothing more than a seat number they wanted to give away. But today, in that cabin, in front of a half-full flight and a staff trained to see only suits and skin, none of it mattered, because no matter how far he had come, they still saw him as someone who didn't belong. And that cut deeper than any headline or business loss ever could. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that this flight was more than just transportation. It was the end of a long week spent closing a deal that would bring thousands of jobs back to communities, like the one he grew up in. He was on his way home, not to relax, but to surprise his mother for her birthday. She didn't know he was coming. She still lived in that small brick house with the same peeling porch paint, the same rose bush she refused to dig up. She didn't care how many buildings had his name on them. To her, he was still Robbie, the boy who read business magazines, the dinner table, and gave half his school lunch to kids who couldn't afford theirs. That was the man they humiliated. Not just a CEO, a son, a mentor, a man who carried the weight of every closed door he'd ever walked through so others wouldn't have to. As he stood there, picket still firm in his grip, he could feel old memories returning, memories he thought he'd outgrown, being followed in stores as a teenager, being ignored in meetings where he was the lead investor, being asked if he was with the caterers at his own fundraising gala. Each moment had chipped away at something inside him, and over time, he'd learned how to shield it, how to smile, nod, and outthink them all. But this wasn't a private insult. This was public. This was them saying, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You don't belong here." Looked around the cabin again. People staring weren't angry, weren't concerned. Most of them were just entertained, like this was a show, and he was the unexpected drama before takeoff. That's what burned the most. The apathy, silence, the way people could see something clearly wrong and still choose to look away. He thought of his employees, dozens of them, of all backgrounds and colors, who looked up to him. What would he tell them? That even at the top this still happens? That dignity still has to be defended inch by inch? He thought of young black boys watching this video on the internet, seeing him being asked to move, seeing him questioned, diminished, denied, all without cause. Would they learn from it? Success doesn't protect you. Money, titles, power, none of it stops the world from seeing you as less. Fire inside him burned higher. He wasn't angry because they didn't recognize him. He was angry because they didn't care who he was. Because they didn't need to know. He'd already decided. And that's what made this not just about a seat. This was about every time someone was told to be smaller, to move, to wait, to accept less. And Robert Hayes had built his life refusing to do any of that, though he stayed standing, not out of pride but out of pain, not for attention, but for something far more personal. A quiet promise he'd made to himself years ago, when a teacher once told him he was too ambitious for someone like you. He had told himself, "I will never let anyone make me shrink again." And now, here he was, 30,000 feet below, flight level, surrounded by cameras, side eyes, and silence. But Robert Hayes wasn't about to shrink. Not now, not ever. The murmurs hadn't stopped. If anything, they grew louder with each passing second. Someone in the back of the plane let out a soft chuckle and a few heads turned, not toward the flight attendant still blocking Robert's path, but toward him, toward the man who was apparently too bold, too black, and too calm to be standing there asking for what he'd already paid for. The flight supervisor arrived, heels clicking down the aisle like punctuation marks on an insult. She didn't even look at Robert first. She leaned toward the young attendant, whispered something with a smirk, then straightened her blazer and finally acknowledged him. "Sir, we've received a concern about your seating arrangement," she said, her voice coated in fake professionalism. "I have a boarding pass, first class, seat 1A. That's the arrangement," Robert replied, holding up his phone. "We understand," she said, not even glancing at it, "but we need to verify your booking. Sometimes people, well, mistakes happen." "Mistakes," he repeated slowly. "So I'm the mistake now?" A pause, a blink, then she tried to recover. No, sir, it's just standard procedure." "For who?" Robert asked. His voice was still even, but it now carried an edge, a quiet power that made a few heads snap toward him. She shifted slightly. "Security has been called just so we can sort this out peacefully." He stared at her, stunned. "Security?" Behind him, whispers turned into full sentences. "Maybe he snuck in. Looks like he doesn't belong here. I bet he's trying to get a free upgrade." Robert turned his head slightly. He heard every word. Not one person defended him. Not one stranger stood up. He was surrounded by silence and quiet judgment that cut deeper than words ever could. Then came the comment that pushed everything further. The supervisor, thinking. She was out of earshot, turned to her colleague and said, "Sir, people like him don't just walk in here with $1,000,000 seats." Robert didn't even flinch. He took one step closer, calm, steady. "People like me?" he asked. She froze, caught. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point, but the fire was in his eyes, a slow burning storm of dignity and restraint. "I've heard that before," he said. "In boardrooms, in banks, at fundraisers where I wrote the biggest check in the room. It always starts the same. People like me who built themselves from the ground up. People like me who hire your sons and daughters. People like me who are reminded over and over again that success doesn't change the rules, it just changes how softly they try to break you." She looked away, uncomfortable now. Another passenger, a white man in a designer suit, stood up suddenly. "I don't feel safe," he announced. "Can we just get him out of here?" Robert looked at him, just for a moment, and in that single look was the weight of decades. Every insult he'd swallowed, every door slammed in his face, every boardroom where he was mistaken for the help. But Robert didn't move. Two uniformed security guards boarded the plane, moving down the aisle with practiced indifference. One of them, a tall man with a clipped voice, stepped in front of Robert. "Sir, we need you to step off the plane." "And if I don't?" Robert asked quietly. "Then we'll have to remove you." "For doing what? Sitting in a seat I paid for?" The guard didn't answer. The crowd around him seemed split, half entertained, half annoyed that this incident was delaying their flight. "I'll ask you one more time," the guard said. Robert stood his ground. Then he reached into his jacket. Not fast, not threatening, just enough to pull out the folded paper he had kept in his inner pocket. A printed receipt, his confirmation, his booking number, first class, seat 1A, paid, approved, secured. He held it up. "Take a good look. This isn't just a piece of paper, it's proof that I belong here, that this," he gestured around the cabin, "should never have happened." But the supervisor wasn't backing down. "Not yet. We'll still need to verify it with corporate," she said. "That'll take a few minutes," the guard added. "You'll need to wait off the plane while we sort it out." "Because I'm the problem," Robert said, shaking his head slowly. "Not the people who questioned me without checking. Not the man who said he didn't feel safe. Not the employee who said people like me. I'm the one being removed for having the nerve to sit in a seat I paid for." And that's when it really sank in. This wasn't about the seat anymore. This was about dignity. This was about the way injustice doesn't always show up in sirens or slurs. It shows up in polite voices and fake apologies, in sideways glances and whispered assumptions, in mistakes that only ever seem to happen to people who look like him. And Robert, even with all he had, even with every reason to rage, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, surrounded by a world that wanted him small and refused to shrink. Robert didn't say another word as the security guard stood firmly in front of him, trying to create an illusion of control. He looked at them both, then at the flight supervisor, who had lost every trace of professionalism in her expression. She was no longer hiding the panic simmering just beneath her calm surface. Her smirk was gone, her voice silent. Without rushing, Robert reached into the inside pocket of his blazer, not his wallet this time, but a sleek black leather card holder. He pulled out a single laminated card and held it up for the supervisor to see. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Read it." Out loud. She took the card with uncertain fingers, slowly bringing it up to eye level, and then her mouth fell slightly open. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath as her eyes scanned the title printed in bold at the bottom of the ID. "Jonathan R. Carter," she read softly. "CEO and founder, Apex Air." She blinked. Once, twice. Silence swept the cabin like a tidal wave. Even the security guard shifted uncomfortably. Robert gently took the card back from her. "That's right, this is my airline." One of the guards took a step back, clearly re-evaluating everything about the situation. The second opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. The passengers who had been whispering now stared in stunned disbelief. A woman up front gasped. The man in the designer suit who said he didn't feel safe looked like he wanted to disappear into his seat. Robert turned to the supervisor again. "Let me guess," he said, voice still calm. "You assumed I was trying to sneak into a seat I couldn't afford, that I didn't belong here, that I was the mistake." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "The only mistake made today," he said, taking a single step forward, "was yours." She stammered. "Mr. Carter, I didn't know." "No, you didn't. You didn't bother to know. That's the problem." Robert turned toward the first flight attendant, the one who had started this entire mess. She looked frozen in place, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly. "I started this airline," he said. "Every detail on this plane, from the seat fabrics to the wine list, you see it? That's me, that's my vision, that's my money, and most of all, that's my name." Passengers began murmuring again, but this time their voices were filled with something different. Shame, sympathy, even support. Robert looked around the cabin. "I've worked with my team to make sure Apex Air was known for luxury, comfort, and above all, respect. But today you have embarrassed yourselves, this crew and this company. And if you treat me like this when you think I'm just a black man with a nice seat, then I can only imagine how you treat others who can't. Speak up." The guards stood silently now, unsure whether they should remain or quietly exit. Robert turned back to them. "You can leave, I won't be needing you." The taller one nodded and motioned for his partner to follow him back off the plane. Robert turned back to the supervisor. "Now, I suggest you call your operations manager. Let them know that the founder is on board, and that I'll be holding a meeting first thing in the morning regarding the conduct I witnessed today." She nodded quickly, now clearly shaken. "Yes, Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry. Truly, this was all a misunderstanding." "No," he said sharply. "It was an assumption," and he walked back toward his seat, slow and steady. As he passed by, passengers moved their eyes away, suddenly ashamed to be seen. The man in 1A stood up before Robert reached him. I didn't know." Robert just held up a hand. "Keep it." The man blinked. "What?" "Keep the seat. I don't need it." Robert turned to the flight attendant who had first stopped him. "And you," he said, not cruelly but firmly, "will be addressing the passengers. You will tell them exactly what happened and exactly who I am." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, Mr. Carter." "Loudly," he added. He nodded and then, with trembling hands, reached for the intercom. As Robert walked calmly down the aisle toward the exit, cabin filled with a strange mix of silence, guilt, and realization. Didn't storm out, didn't shout. Every step he took reminded them all they had judged the wrong man. Robert stood at the edge of the jet bridge, his presence commanding, unshaken by what had just unfolded. Behind him, silence reigned inside the plane. Every passenger was still seated, processing the bombshell they had just witnessed. The flight supervisor, still gripping the intercom in one hand, looked like she wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. Robert turned slightly and looked back. "Don't forget," he said evenly, "you owe your passengers the truth." Her eyes met his. There was no defiance left, only quiet understanding that the curtain had been pulled back, and there was no way to hide. The moment he stepped into the terminal, a young man in a sharp navy blue suit approached swiftly. "Dad," he said, voice low but urgent, "I saw everything. I've already been in touch with legal." Robert gave him a short nod. "Good. They need to know we're not going to let this slide." His son, Malcolm Carter, Apex Air's general counsel, handed him a tablet. On the screen was a recording, already going viral online. A passenger had caught the entire exchange from the moment Robert was stopped to the moment he revealed who he was. 15 million views and counting, Malcolm said. "We've already got requests for interviews. It's bigger than us now." Robert didn't smile. He didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Back at the gate, a regional manager for the airline, now informed of the disaster, rushed up in a panic. She looked at Robert with wide, frantic eyes. "Mr. Carter, I just received the incident report. I had no idea you were even boarding today. This is completely unacceptable." "I'm aware," Robert said. "That's why we're not sweeping this under the rug. I want the names of everyone involved on my desk within the hour." She swallowed hard. "Of course," he pointed back at the aircraft. "That flight supervisor? Grounded, pending investigation. Every crew member who didn't speak up? Retraining, immediately." The manager nodded furiously, scribbling notes on her tablet. "I don't care how good someone's resume looks," Robert added. "If they can't recognize basic respect when they see it, They don't belong here. Malcolm, standing slightly behind him, crossed his arms. We're also filing a formal report with the Civil Aviation Authority. Discrimination at this level isn't just an internal matter. The regional manager paled further. I don't want apologies, Robert continued. I want accountability. Back on the plane, the intercom finally crackled to life. The flight attendant's voice, shaky but audible, echoed through the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make a correction. The gentleman we asked to step off the plane earlier, his name is Robert Carter. He is not only a VIP passenger, he is the CEO and founder of Apex Air. Murmurs broke out instantly. Some passengers looked visibly ashamed. Others shook their heads in disbelief. He was removed from his seat because we assumed he didn't belong there, because we judged him without knowing who he was. Her voice cracked slightly, and then the intercom went silent. Robert turned to Malcolm. Let's walk. As they made their way through the terminal, passengers were now looking at Robert with wide eyes. Some recognized him from the recording, others from business magazines. A few nodded quietly in support. Near the escalators, the man who had taken Robert's seat stood with his luggage. He looked up, saw Robert, and quickly walked over. Mr. Carter, he began, flustered. I wanted to apologize. That shouldn't have happened. I was just trying to... Robert raised a hand, stopping him. You don't have to explain. I feel terrible, the man continued. I didn't know who you were. Robert locked eyes with him. And that's the problem. You thought if I wasn't someone important, then it was okay. The man's lips parted, but he said nothing more. You should ask yourself why you were so quick to be uncomfortable just because of what I look like. With that, Robert turned and walked away. Outside the terminal, reporters were beginning to gather. Questions rang out. Mr. Carter, is it true? Will there be a lawsuit? What do you want to say to those who judged you? Robert paused at the curb. Then he turned to face them. You humiliated me for nothing, he said, voice steady and loud enough for all to hear. If I was anyone else, I would have walked out of there broken, angry, silent. But I'm not. And now, I'll make sure this never happens again, to anyone. Cameras flashed. His words hung in the air like thunder. Back in Apex Air's corporate headquarters, the fallout came fast. The supervisor was suspended. The lead flight attendant was dismissed. Mandatory cultural competency training was announced company-wide, and a new division was launched under Malcolm's leadership, dedicated to passenger rights and equality. Robert didn't gloat. He didn't post a self-congratulatory video. He let the actions speak louder. But one line, from a press conference, a week later, made headlines around the world. Power is not about the seat you sit in, it's about what you do when you're told you don't belong there. The news cycle moved on, but Robert's story didn't fade. In communities across the country, it sparked conversations that had long been silenced. Barbershops, classrooms, boardrooms, everywhere people gathered, they were asking the same questions. What does dignity look like? Who gets respect without having to prove they deserve it? Robert sat in his office a week later, high above the city skyline. The sun had just started to set, painting everything in warm gold. On his desk sat a letter, handwritten from a teenage boy in Atlanta. I saw what happened to you on that flight, it read, and for the first time, I saw someone who looked like me win, not by yelling, not by fighting, but by standing tall. Thank you for showing me that we don't have to lose ourselves to be strong. Robert read it twice. He thought about all the young people who were told they didn't belong, who were looked at sideways when they entered luxury stores, business meetings, or VIP lounges, who learned from a young age to walk carefully so they wouldn't be mistaken for a threat. He thought about how quickly people judged, how deeply those judgments could cut, and how rarely anyone was held accountable for them. But something had changed now. His silence had ended. He had spent decades building a company that stood for excellence. That day on the plane had taught him that excellence meant nothing if it couldn't defend the right to be treated fairly. And now, people were listening. Airlines began revisiting their customer service training. Other CEOs reached out to share their own experiences. One even admitted in private that he too had been asked to move seats, just not recently and not since he'd started going gray. There was still a long way to go, but the first step had been taken. Robert stood at the window, arms folded, looking out at the city he helped shape. Behind him, Malcolm entered with a small smile. They approved it, his son said. The diversity and dignity clause, it's official company policy now. Robert turned slightly. Good. It includes passengers and employees alike. Anyone facing discrimination has a direct line to the top. You. He nodded quietly. As it should be. The moral wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was in every policy change, every heart that felt seen, every child who now understood that success wasn't about proving worth to those who doubted you. but about never letting their doubt define you. Respect is not based on appearance. Dignity is a right, not a privilege. Money doesn't define a person's worth. Character does. And power, real power, is using your voice to protect those who are still afraid to speak. Robert didn't want revenge. He wanted reflection. He didn't want to be seen as a man who owned a seat, but as one who refused to let others be told they couldn't sit down. And now, every empty chair was a reminder. Not of where he had been removed, but of where others would now be welcomed. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of how they looked, dressed, or where they came from? What did you do in that moment, or what do you wish you'd done? Stories like Robert's aren't just rare, they're real. They happen every day, sometimes in quiet ways, and sometimes in front of the whole world. But every time someone stands up, speaks out, or simply refuses to accept injustice, it creates change. If this story moved you, made you think, or reminded you of something you've experienced, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. And if you believe in fairness, dignity, and respect for every person, regardless of status or background, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that open eyes, challenge norms, and remind us of the power of standing tall.